up because an Amnesty International report has found that the South African government is failing millions that are living in informal settlements. The report links worsening floods in cities like Johannesburg, eThekwini, and even Cape Town to the combined impact of poverty and climate change. Human Settlements Minister Thembi Simelane says she welcomes the findings, which spotlight or highlight the growing number of informal settlements in the country, the right to adequate housing, as well as the slow pace of upgrades. Minister Simelane joining us now for this conversation. Minister, appreciate your time. Always good at chatting to you. It's always great, even if when you're in studio, actually. We should do that more often, maybe. Well, we'll try. Nonetheless, let's start with this conversation. It's a significant and a hugely important one. Your portfolio is one that matters a lot, especially when you have more than 3,000 informal settlements across the country. It paints a harrowing picture, does this report. When you read headlines like flooded and forgotten, what does that say to you about our housing policy in 2025?
Well, thank you very much and good morning to our listeners. I'll try to make time to the physical visit at the studio. I actually like it as well. Look, I appreciate the report by Amnesty International. Actually, we do our own assessment. We currently have moved slightly above the 3,000 mark of informal settlement. As we speak, there are 4,075 informal settlements across the country. Gauteng obviously leads, followed by KwaZulu-Natal and Cape Town. Gauteng is a region of around 800, so they account close to 1,000 of those informal settlements are here in the vicinity of Gauteng. We are making strides as government, already on the record having 4 million people who have been provided houses. In our waiting database, people who qualify according to the policy of the elderly, people with disability and child-headed household takes us to around 3 million. I made a commitment in the last interview we had that we will definitely be ready at the beginning of the year with SITA to launch openly our waiting database so that you could be able to navigate people who have handed houses to and people who are still on a waiting list. There's been quite a number of challenges that has been decided. So I do guess what exacerbates the increase of this assessment, which were assisted by our entity HDA to do on a monthly basis. One is the climate change. Some of the areas where we correctly had built or individuals had built for themselves are now within a flight line, for example. And secondly, of course, there is a scourge of poverty and growth in terms of the generation and the layer that comes at the time that our PNG program was launched. And that increases in the number. And obviously, the shrinking fiscus.
Yeah.
But what are we trying to do about it? We are trying to introduce IBTs, which is innovative building technologies. And we'll be running a summit where we'll be inviting partners, including the media, on how best, and this is a best model which India and China are using in terms of building in an alternative way, which is more fire resistant and also drought resistant, water resistant, to ensure that we don't go back into what we have already delivered. But we're making strides in housing South Africans.
Yeah. Look, I hear you, and I can appreciate that there is some effort in getting this. But would you be willing to admit that the department and government in general has rather been very reactive to the situation rather than proactive? We can still be planning for some situations. I know that you won't necessarily always know how many milliliters of rain, etc. But our weather systems are fairly good. We know some of the areas where these informal settlements have sprung up. Should we not be planning better?
Well, we could, but if it was also easy to move South Africans and relocate them. Let's take the example of the flooded communities of Umtata, King Sawata Dalinjevo district in OR Tambo. The community members were advised, you are in the river bank, let us relocate you. They refused. We are planning relocation on people who are on sinkholes. They do not want the offer of government of a 40 square meter and themselves getting a bigger yard with services. And that's not the only challenge that we have. We have a challenge of resources. We have a challenge of those who get houses and dispose of them and still want to go back into the queue of dealing with what the issue, of allocation. The policy is very clear. You allocate a house to a needy, a person who meets the requirements. Yes, not everyone who meets the requirement we have been able to allocate a house to, but we have got programs in place which ensures that we allocate houses we build. We build no less than 3,000 houses per annum, at least in provinces like Mpumalanga, Free State, Limpopo, Gauteng, and the Western Cape. But that just does not seem to be enough for the number of people, including those who don't qualify, by the way, who are sitting in our informal settlements because they do not qualify for our policy.
How much of this is an internal migration issue? Because people are moving from, whether it be coastal or other provinces, into more affluent. Yeah. So is it just that, or is it also immigration, meaning from other countries, etc.?
Both. It's a mixed bag. If you go to Diepsloot, for example, taking just what, it's a mixed bag. It's a person who has been allocated a house in the Eastern Cape, and possibly because of no job opportunities, things, let me go and try it in Gauteng, he gets into a squatter camp. Even when Gauteng wants to respond to allocating him or her house, he doesn't qualify because he's already a beneficiary of our program. And then we have got a migration problem where you have got undocumented foreign nationals who are in squatter camps. But even those who are documented, not all qualify for a provision of a housing in a human settlement policy. We actually should and are dealing with people who are elderly, that is my mom, your mom, and even beyond into your grandmother's age, a person with disability, yes, who receive a social grant, but you will recall that his pay is below 3,500 and a child-headed household. A child-headed household excludes me and you in case our parents are late, but we're talking about the 18-year-old and below who possibly is taking care of his younger siblings who are in primary school or high school. Is the responsibility of government to provide housing. And that's clear, cut and dry, but we still have a 3 million in our waiting list to provide for that category.
Okay, so where does the help come from? Because it feels like there might be a policy contradiction here. Municipalities say they can't provide services to what is illegal settlements, but the Constitution doesn't make rights conditional on land tenure.
We don't make provision to illegal foreigners as well, whether they are legalized. That's why I'm saying our policy is very clear. We provide a house to a South African. Municipalities don't build houses actually. We're a concurrent function. Provinces build. We transfer budget to Gauteng, Limpopo, and any otherwise. Municipalities provide land, barren land, and we put services in the form of bulk infrastructure. Could be water, sewer, electricity, and roads. Yes, we do partner if a municipality will be having an additional fund, but they solely rely on our human settlement grant. In relation to informal settlement, we've got an informal settlement upgrading grant, and we also have a neighborhood upgrade grant, which is usually an urban development grant utilized by our metros. So there's no contradiction. In fact, the 3 million that I'm talking about will be a list that gets to be populated by municipalities themselves, because our people don't walk into national to register. They don't come in the office where I'm sitting. They go to a local municipality, register. We sit periodically to consolidate that. HDA use our aerial drove to make sure that we do the assessment. To compare with that, then we have a team of informal settlements which walks in jointly with municipalities as we allocate the budget for them to be able to build. It is just South Africans, most who are also unemployed, who are on the queue. What service do we provide? We do service stands for those ones. We allocate a stand that is service to allow you to build your own house. It could be a shack at the beginning, but you do not qualify in the criteria of the 3. Therefore, we'll not allocate a house, but we will allocate a form of service to allow you so that whatever you generate, small as it is, you build in an area that is designated and is habitable and is earmarked for human settlement.
Yeah, and it's those services that I think are very basic and important. Minister, I have two questions, so I'm going to try to rush through them if I may. The first one is really just the proliferation still of other settlements. And I say others because it's not necessarily informal. We see these happening, whether it be out in the Northern Cape, where you begin to ask yourself where exactly this comes from, and where they're allowed to just spring up anywhere ultimately. And I'm not talking specifically just Orania only, but like other areas like that. Is there a concern from government on the rising number of these settlements?
Yes, there is a concern. And yes, actually, we do also see fault in ourselves, in municipalities strengthening their bylaws, but also ensuring that they take care of their land. We also have got concern in terms of private land.
Yeah.
Most of these informal settlements are not even regulated. You wake up this morning, as you are driving to work, you see people are putting up a shack, even on a land that is not earmarked for human settlement. And the weakness is mainly on us, particularly at the municipal level, to ensure that, one, in areas where they are not designated for human settlement, we shouldn't allow people to build. And the law allows us to stop them. But two, to be ourselves, to champion human settlement and plan for areas where we would want people to settle, even if we put them still in shacks. But it will be in areas that has been assessed. It will be in areas that are properly demarcated. They're not too close to one another, so that you don't have, for example, instances of massive fire deaths that usually happen in the Western Cape because of excessive wind, where 400 shacks in a day or in one night will get burnt because they're too congested to one another. We offer those grants of unblocking of human settlements or informal settlements to provinces, but it will not be a sustainable project and a program if we do not make sure that we all become law-abiding citizens and we enforce the law where it is needed. And I think as government, we are found short all the time there, and we become reactive and responsive.
Yeah, so Minister, then my final question is in relation to a fire incident that we're speaking about on the show and that we're bringing a highlight to. It is the 5 people that have passed away in that informal settlement, in Steve Biko informal settlement in Ekurhuleni as well. And perhaps just your thoughts and government thoughts around that situation and the number of times this continues to happen, and it's not just by freak accident.
Well, let me start by saying condolences to the families that have lost their loved ones. We share in their pain. I've had a communication with Executive Mayor, and both our teams from National and from Ekurhuleni are on site now to assist the families in terms of our disaster response packages, which they need to be assisted on. But again, as we have said, I mean, I think Ekurhuleni have got no less than 122 informal settlement in its surroundings and the area of jurisdiction of the municipality, of which they've prioritized most of them with the alarming resources to be able to start and rebuild and build the houses. But it helps also when an informal settlement is initiated by the leaders themselves of the community, that we engage with government for assistance, which we usually don't charge for them, in pegging correctly, placing people in desirable space to avert such type of challenges. But ordinarily, once we have done that, people even build in areas which are demarcated for roads, which are demarcated for open space and parks, and the areas become congested. But you usually don't blame, as government, people who are needy. We say condolences to them. We'll go back again and try to ensure that the informal settlement also becomes habitable. And we are pleading for commitment and also understanding that we come from a good place to avert such types of tragedies befalling our people. And they are very common in times towards our festive season, precisely because everybody is home, is a jovial mood. Sometimes they forget to switch off their primer stove and all that, and fire can just spark at any given moment, and it becomes disastrous. But we will try and assist with all we can. Both our teams, as I said, from national and the city of Ekurhuleni are already on site to assist the families in Steve Biko informal settlements.
Minister, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Always good to have this conversation with you. As we said, that open invitation is there for you to be in studio as well. So many other elements we could really be talking about. Yep, would love to have you right